The cruise ship you're about to board just threw 40,000 plastic bottles into the ocean last week. They'll do it again next week, and the week after that. But here's what makes this stranger. They're technically following the law. Royal Caribbean operates the largest cruise ship in the world, Icon of the Seas. It weighs 250,800 tons, carries 7,600 passengers, and generates roughly the same amount of waste in a single day as a town of 20,000 people generates in a week. That waste has to go somewhere, and despite what the brochures tell you about environmental responsibility, most of it ends up exactly where you'd expect. Ships have operated under a different set of rules for centuries. Once you're in international waters, you're essentially in a legal no man's land where enforcement becomes nearly impossible. The International Maritime Organization sets guidelines, but compliance is voluntary and verification is rare. So when a cruise line tells you they're committed to sustainability, what they actually mean is they're committed to whatever won't get them fined in the handful of ports that actually check. Every cruise ship generates three main types of waste: sewage, grey water, and solid waste. Sewage is exactly what you think it is. Grey water is everything from sinks, showers, and kitchens. Solid waste includes plastics, food scraps, and general garbage. A single large cruise ship produces approximately 210,000 gallons of sewage and 1 million gallons of grey water every week. Now, technically, international law prohibits dumping untreated sewage within 12 nautical miles of shore. Beyond that, it's fair game. The law requires treatment systems, but there's no standardized definition of what treated actually means. Some ships have advanced purification systems that genuinely clean the water. Others have systems that barely qualify as filtration. Both are legal. The economics of waste disposal at sea are brutally simple. Storing waste until you reach port costs money in storage space and disposal fees. Treating waste to a high standard costs money in equipment and maintenance. Dumping it overboard costs essentially nothing. You can probably guess which option gets chosen when no one's watching. Carnival Corporation paid a $40 million fine in 2019, not for dumping waste, but for deliberately hiding it. They had installed what's called a magic pipe, a literal secret pipe that bypassed pollution control equipment and dumped oily bilge water straight into the ocean. The remarkable part isn't that they did this, it's that they got caught. Princess Cruises, a Carnival subsidiary, was already on probation for the same violation when they did it again. Here's where it gets interesting. That $40 million fine sounds massive, but Carnival's annual revenue is roughly $21 billion. The fine represented about 0.19% of their yearly income. For context, if you earn $50,000 a year, that's equivalent to a $95 fine. Not exactly a deterrent. The flags these ships fly aren't accidental choices. 90% of cruise ships are registered in countries like Panama, Liberia, or the Bahamas. These are flags of convenience, chosen specifically because they offer minimal regulation and maximum flexibility. A ship owned by an American company, built in a French shipyard, and operating in Caribbean waters will almost certainly fly a Bahamian flag. This lets them avoid American labor laws, safety standards, and tax obligations while still docking in Miami every week. Labor practices on cruise ships exist in this same regulatory void. Crew members typically work 7 days a week for contracts lasting 6 to 8 months. There are no days off. A room attendant might work 14-hour days for around $2,000 a month. That sounds reasonable until you remember they're working twice as many hours as a normal job, which brings the hourly rate to around $4.75. Many crew members come from the Philippines, Indonesia, or India, countries where these wages go further but still represent exploitation by any reasonable standard. The cruise industry generates approximately $25 billion in revenue annually, while employing workers under conditions that would be illegal on land, dumping waste that would trigger environmental lawsuits in any port city, and operating under tax structures that let them avoid contributing to the countries where they actually do business. But passengers keep boarding. 28 million people took cruises in 2023. The ships keep getting bigger. Icon of the Seas cost $2 billion to build, and Royal Caribbean has already ordered 2 more just like it. The industry isn't shrinking or reforming. It's expanding into the exact model that maximizes profit while externalizing every possible cost onto oceans, port cities, and workers who have no leverage to demand better. The question isn't whether this system is sustainable. It obviously isn't. The real question is why it's been allowed to function this way for so long and what it would actually take to change it. Because the same forces that created floating environmental disasters are the ones that keep them profitable. The answer lies in understanding what the cruise industry actually is. It's not tourism. It's regulatory arbitrage wrapped in a vacation package. The entire business model depends on exploiting gaps between jurisdictions, finding the lowest common denominator of oversight, and staying just mobile enough to avoid accountability. When environmental groups pressure Bahamian regulators, the company threatens to reflag to Liberia. When labor advocates push for better wages, the hiring shifts to countries with weaker unions. The ship is always somewhere else when consequences arrive. This isn't unique to cruising, but cruises perfect the model in ways other industries can't. A factory can't sail away when inspectors show up. A hotel can't change its national registration to avoid fire codes. But a cruise ship operates in perpetual motion, physically and legally untethered from the places it affects most. The ports absorb the crowds, the infrastructure costs, the waste management burden. The oceans absorb the dumping. The workers absorb the labor conditions. The company absorbs the profit. Reform efforts have tried targeting this system from multiple angles. Environmental regulations get stricter in certain regions, so ships adjust their routes. Some ports have started charging higher fees to account for the actual costs of hosting these vessels. Alaska imposed a $46 per passenger tax in 2016. The cruise lines immediately launched a multi-million-dollar campaign to repeal it. They won. The tax was cut nearly in half. Labor organizing faces even steeper obstacles. Crew members work under contracts that often include clauses prohibiting them from speaking to media or joining unions. They live on board, eat on board, and exist entirely within company-controlled space. Organizing a traditional strike would require workers to somehow coordinate across dozens of ships while being constantly surveilled and facing immediate deportation if terminated. It's not impossible, but the barriers are deliberately insurmountable. International maritime law technically provides protections, but enforcement requires flag states to actually inspect and penalize their registered vessels. When your entire business model as a flag state is offering minimal oversight in exchange for registration fees, aggressive enforcement would be self-defeating. Panama registers more ships than any country on Earth. Their maritime authority employs around 100 inspectors. They're not finding problems because they're not designed to find problems. What would genuine change require? Start with eliminating flags of convenience entirely. Require ships to register in the country where their parent company is headquartered and subject them to those labor, environmental, and tax standards. A Carnival ship would follow US law. An MSC ship would follow Swiss law. Immediately, the cost advantage disappears. Wages rise. Dumping stops, or at least becomes prosecutable. Tax revenue flows to governments instead of vanishing into offshore accounts. Port cities could cooperate rather than compete. If Miami, Barcelona, Sydney, and every major cruise port simultaneously agreed on minimum standards and fees, the industry couldn't simply relocate. Ships need these ports. They're not negotiable the way flag states are, but coordination requires political will that currently doesn't exist because each city fears losing business to the next. Environmental monitoring technology exists right now that could track every ship's waste disposal in real time. Satellite imaging, mandatory onboard sensors, blockchain-verified dumping logs. The tools aren't theoretical, they're just not required. Making them mandatory would mean someone has to require them, and the jurisdictional gaps ensure no one entity has that authority. None of these solutions are complicated. They're just expensive for the industry and inconvenient for the countries that profit from maintaining the current system. So the cycle continues. Ships get bigger, profits grow, oceans accumulate waste. Workers sign another contract because $2,000 a month is still more than they'd make at home. Passengers board because a 7-day Caribbean cruise costs less than a week at a resort, and most people don't look past the price tag. The cruise industry isn't an aberration. It's a case study in what happens when corporations get large enough to forum shop their way out of accountability. It's what unregulated global capitalism looks like when you let it float. Every system that makes cruising profitable, cheap labor, lax environmental standards, tax avoidance, is a system designed intentionally by people who benefit from it. The ships aren't the problem. They're just the most visible symptom. The real issue is that we've built a global economy where the most successful business strategy is finding new ways to avoid contributing to the societies you extract value from. Cruise lines didn't invent that game. They just play it better than most. And as long as the game's rules stay the same, the ships will keep sailing, the oceans will keep absorbing what gets dumped, and the workers will keep signing contracts they can't afford to refuse. The industry isn't going to reform itself. It's going to keep doing exactly what it's been doing, because so far, it's worked perfectly. The only question left is whether anyone with actual power will decide that's unacceptable. Until then, you know exactly what you're funding when you book that cruise. The waste isn't hidden, the labor practices aren't secret, the tax avoidance isn't subtle. It's all documented, public, and completely legal. That's not a bug in the system, it's the entire point.